Hello and welcome to this short presentation on using Excel slicers within a JET report. What I'm going to show you today is a very quick overview of how this is set up. For those that are not familiar with slicers, I'll just quickly cover off what a slicer does. It's a new feature that was introduced a few years ago within Excel. Basically there's a new slicer option on the ribbon, and it can be used to filter things like pivot tables and table data. So what I'm going to do is quickly show you how that works. I'm going to use some information I've used previously in my demos, which is a fruit list. It's a very simple list of fruit, the type of fruit I've got, the colour and the quantity of those that I have sitting in my kitchen at home or something like that. I'm going to convert this list to a table in Excel, and then I'm going to add a slicer. So basically the table contains the data. The slicer will enable me to filter this data. I have three options in my slicers that they correspond to the columns in the table. So if I choose two options, fruit and colour, I will now get two separate slicers which I can move around, and then quite simply, if I get rid of the snippets box, I can use the slicer to physically filter the table data. So for example, if I click on banana, I can see how many bananas I have, grape, how many different grapes I have, etc. And for the apple, you can see that I have red and green apples. I can use the second slicer on the color to filter the list even further. I can clear the filters in any one slicer to see the results of the second slicer. Clear the second slicer filter, I can see all of the results of the table. So basically in concept that is the slicer functionality. So what we're going to do now is just quickly look at how that function, that feature in Excel, can be used in a JET report. So I've prepared one to show you, and basically I have three tabs in my spreadsheet. We're going to look at the first one. You can imagine that I have some sort of visit data system where salespeople go out and they visit customers, they discuss potential orders, that sort of thing. They record the results of their visit and the potential order total that that customer is likely to place with them. They place that data into a system which is then downloaded into this spreadsheet. So this is basically a list of the salespeople, the date of the visit and the potential order that they've got from the customers for that visit. I then have a second sheet which is basically a pivot table which is looking at the visit data, and I've added a slicer to be able to filter that data. So it works in exactly the same way as I showed you earlier. So basically I can click on a value in the slicer and it will filter the pivot table for me with the value that I've chosen. If I select two values, I can see the results of those two values. Okay, so moving on, my third sheet is actually the JET report itself. I have a copy of that slicer on this sheet here, so we can see what the results of the filters are. I can click on this sheet, on this slicer here. It will filter the results of the other sheet in exactly the same way. So you can see here I've got the BD selected and it has filtered the pivot table accordingly. If I select PS here, it's also reflected that in the slicer on this sheet. The two are linked together. My JET report has two elements to it. First of all, this one here is looking at the sales lines table, filtering it for the results of the slicer. So it's using the slicer MP function here to filter for the value that the user has selected in the slicer for the salesperson, and it's also looking at outstanding quantities on the sales order. The second element here is looking at the sales invoice line, exactly the same principle, so it's filtering it for the value that has been selected in the slicer. Here is my summary of the data. So this is looking at the slicer value to see what's been selected. It will only refresh when I run the report. Here is a lookup to evaluate the pivot table data for the visit data, and here is looking at the two totals from the current sales order lines and the sales invoice lines. Again, that will then be filtered by the salesperson. Now when I run the report, if I select a salesperson here, for example, and go into my Jet tab, run the report will be updated with the salesperson data. So here I have the salesperson DC. The visit data from his input from his other system was 75,000, but there are no orders or invoices for this salesperson. So the difference is the variance is the difference between the two. It gives the sales manager an idea of what the salesperson was saying he was going to take in the way of orders and actually achieved. If I filter this for PS and run the report again, I can see that I've got both visit data and nav data, and this salesperson has performed better than he predicted. So again, slicers can be used to apply a filter to your Jet report in exactly the same way as if you had applied a manual filter that the user had input through a choice on the report options or something like that. This is an example of one of the features that we have covered in our Jet Advanced training course. If you're interested in that, please contact your account manager and they will be able to discuss in more detail the features that are discussed in the training and potential dates for the training that you can attend. Thank you for looking at this video, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.